Thank you.
Dobry den, Slovenia. Did I pronounce that correctly? Good evening, Ljubljana. My name is Wim Stalmans. I'm the founder of the Blockchain Academy in Luxembourg. It's a private initiative. We are building, we are in early stage of building a curriculum, educative curriculum around blockchain. Thank you very much, Natasha Istok, for having me, for inviting me. Let me first of all have a quick idea about the audience. How many people consider themselves, it's actually a question that I shouldn't ask anymore, newbies? How many people consider themselves newbies? Okay, good, cool. How many people bought in the last 3 months ICO? Okay. How many people can define blockchain with 2 words? Yeah. Okay, very well. The title of my talk, I have 20 minutes. If I go over these 20 minutes and you start to wave, I don't have a timer, so then I'll know. The title of my talk is Blockchain Applications Start Thinking for Yourself. So if today we read about blockchain applications, then it can be kind of overwhelming. I mean, to see the woods for the trees, it's kind of complicated, okay? You read many things. You have on the one side a very simple concept, which is blockchain, which is the 2-word definition, distributed ledger. So just a big Excel sheet with on each line a transaction. And out of that big Excel sheet, with on each line a transaction, pops an incredible number of applications. So in order for us to be able to start understanding how these blockchain applications come into existence, and potentially start to think for ourselves, play ourselves with the elements that are at the basis for these applications, well, I propose that today we create together a small framework. A small framework that will allow us to understand, to start to think for ourselves about these blockchain applications. And potentially to start inventing ourselves, okay? So, if we're talking about blockchain applications, then these applications, they exist on the intersection of 3 categories of building blocks, okay? A building block, assets. A building block, owners. And a building block, blockchain characteristics, blockchain features. You can start to take elements out of these building blocks, combine them, and see what comes out of it, okay? So what I propose to do now is to have a look at all these categories of building blocks, look at the elements that are present in these building blocks, and then after that, we're going to do like 10 to 15 quickly together exercises. We're going to pick elements out of these building blocks and have a look at what comes out as application, okay? Many of these applications you already know, but maybe you don't know that they exist because of the combination of certain elements, okay? So, first of all, let's talk about the building block characteristics of the blockchain, characteristics and features. A very important characteristic and feature of the blockchain is the distributed nature, which means that the power of saving data, computing data, validating data, and validating property titles is taken away from a central point and moved towards a community of computers. Okay? Very important and very powerful characteristic of blockchain. This distributed nature has also an implication. It is fault tolerant, meaning that even if some points, some participants, some computers in this distributed network are faulty or even fraudulent, well, the whole system continues to operate correctly. Okay? Let's move on to some other characteristics of a blockchain. As you probably all know, blockchain is consensus-based. Well, actually, that's kind of very powerful. Okay? Once a new transaction pops up in the blockchain, collectively, we are going to engage in kind of an audit. Okay? And it's only when this audit has an okay result that the transaction will appear in the blockchain. That also means that after this transaction appeared in the blockchain, you don't need to start to reconcile with the counterparties. Okay? And you have kind of instantaneous settlement. Some other characteristics and features of the blockchain. It's global, it's transparent. For the public blockchains, it's permissionless. It's time-stamped. And nevertheless, that blockchain is global and transparent, we can exist on the blockchain in an anonymous or pseudonymous way. Okay? So keep in mind all these elements. We're going to play around with them afterwards. Very important characteristic of blockchain is that the database is cryptographically sealed. Once a transaction has been approved by the community and inserted in the blockchain, there is a cryptographical seal on that blockchain that makes it irreversible and makes it immutable. Once a transaction is in the blockchain, it can't be changed, it can't be deleted, it will be there forever in the state it was at the moment that it entered into the blockchain. Okay? All kind of very powerful characteristics. If we take all these elements together, then we can start to say that this blockchain allows us to have one single source of truth. And if you think about it, if you have one single source of truth, then comes out of it the most powerful element of blockchain, and that is digital scarcity. You put in the blockchain the existence of a certain Bitcoin with a certain Bitcoin number, let's say, and it is owned by a certain person, well, that is digital scarcity. You can't have twice that Bitcoin owned by two different persons. Okay? Very, very powerful. Another element, as you may know, blockchain or digital ledger technology is programmable. We can start to add conditions to transactions. We can start to say, okay, this transaction, a transfer of a house from person A to person B, executed in 1 year. You write that in a little code, and in 1 year it will execute automatically. So programmable. Let's have a look at the second building block in the simplified, very simplified framework we are building together. The assets. What kind of assets can we put on blockchain? Anything. Anything that is representable in a digital form, and actually we can represent anything in a digital form, you can put it as an asset on the blockchain. So that could be physical assets, that could be rights, voting, corporate, societal. We can have financial instruments, we can have intellectual property, music, written pieces, written content, certificates, bird ideas, documents, data. And you can start adding yourself, okay? Let's have a look at the owners. There too, any kind of owner can exist on the blockchain. Physical persons, corporations, NGOs. A very important element is that machines too can exist on the blockchain. We could imagine that over the blockchain, an autonomous car pays the gas station, okay? So, bringing that all together, we have our initial framework with the blockchain applications on the intersection, okay? And from here on, you can start to play around. And that's what we are going to do in the next slide. We'll have like 10, so I'm going fast, 10 examples, 10 to 15 examples. And we're going to take each time, essentially, I'm leaving out kind of the owners for this exercise. We're going to take an asset, one or more assets, combine them with one or more blockchain features, blockchain characteristics, and we'll have a look what we created in the blockchain, okay? Okay, another element I forgot. Each time we do the exercise of combining and seeing what comes out of it, we're also going to see how it is written in the blockchain database. This is a very simplified structure of the blockchain database with my excuses for the line jumps. That's kind of an incompatibility between Google and Microsoft. So, very simplified structure with on each line, as you know, a transaction and 6 columns from someone to someone, a certain asset that is transferred, the transaction that is timestamped, you have a digital signature, and then in the 6th column you have conditions where you can put programs, code. Okay? Let's have our examples. Let's take out of the building block assets data. Data is an asset, okay? And let's combine that with digital scarcity. Well, we have what we all know, Bitcoin, okay? And how is that written in the database? So on the bottom of the slide, you see the system sends to a certain person a certain Bitcoin number. It is timestamped, it is signed, and you created Bitcoin. First example. Second example, you can also, with the blockchain, transfer that Bitcoin, okay? So you take the cryptocurrency we just created before, you combine it with other features, characteristics of the blockchain, which is the global aspect, which is the immediacy, which is the consensus. Well, you can start to send digital money from one place in the world to another instantaneously, okay? Again, it is sent, so the way it is written in the database, it's sent from someone to someone with the number of the block of the Bitcoin. It is signed, and there you have it. We can do some identity management. We take as an asset identity, we take as a blockchain characteristic feature the one single source of truth, and we could imagine to have in the transaction below a government that allocates to the citizens an official blockchain identity. Okay. We could have digital rights management. Let's take two assets. Yeah, that one is from a long time ago in the meantime. Let's take two assets, identity and rights certificate. And let's combine that with the blockchain characteristics. Again, one single source of truth. And you have a usage right management system. Okay? So you have the rights owner who's sending to the buyer of the right a right certificate. It is signed, and there you have your rights management system. Very simple, but very powerful. You could have an intellectual property management system. You take intellectual property, any kind of intellectual property, as an asset. You combine it with the other asset we created before, or the government potentially created before for us. You combine these two assets, you combine it with one single source of truth again, and you have an intellectual property management system. Okay? Let's move on. Reputation management system. From a rating platform to the person that is rated, a certain reputation rating as asset. It is digitally signed, and you have another application on the blockchain. You could imagine a completely new concept, which is called triple entry accounting. Because you have one important feature of the blockchain, which is one single source of truth, we could imagine going forward that accounting systems take their truth out of the blockchain. So there is one single input in their double entry accounting, and that input is already audited. Okay? So you have a triple entry accounting system. Supply chain management. You take physical assets, one single source of truth and transparency, and you have international trade that is more fluent, that is more efficient, where you have less litigation because everybody knows what is going on. Okay. Another very powerful blockchain application. Let's introduce in the examples the aspect programmability, or the smart contracts, where according to certain triggers, which are verifiable online, the transaction will be auto-executed. We could imagine a self-executing option contract. Okay? So the conditions would be like a certain price threshold is broken, and the second condition is like, okay, the option owner declares he wants to exercise the option. Well, if the contract detects that these two conditions are met, well, the contract and the transaction auto-executes. Self-executing insurance contract. Some kind of officially an online verifiable and available damage occurrence has happened, and that could be the trigger in a smart contract for the payment of a certain payout to the person that is insured. Let's have a last example, or the second last, that is self-executing dividend payout. So we could imagine, we saw before triple entry accounting, that you have kind of a completely automated accounting system out of which comes a certain level of profit, and then you could have a contract that has some rules that decides if a certain level of profit has been reached, well, then pay a certain dividend to a list of equity holders, okay? If you bring all that together, then you can push blockchain application to a very sophisticated concept, which is the autonomous organization, okay? Where with smart contracts, you're going to define the players in an organization. You're going to define their rights. You're going to define according to which rules the organization is going to function. And all that you're going to write in the 6th column, as we saw before. You put a code in there and you have an organization that can function autonomously. Okay? So, I have some homework for you. So, from this point on, I would say like, okay, this is a very basic framework, but it could help like for us to understand the applications we read about, the applications that are out there for the moment. We could start to imagine ourselves to combine some elements. So go ahead, play around with it. And maybe next year we have in Slovenia the next invention for blockchain application. So thank you very much for your attention.